December 2001, a helicopter carrying a joint team of U.S. Green Berets and unknown Canadian operators slammed into the Afghan desert during a blinding brownout. The crash was so violent, the altimeter instruments still read 15 meters when the chassis slammed into the dirt. But the operators inside didn't abort. They dismounted, walked 600 meters in pitch black, blew a hole in a fortified Taliban compound, and executed a flawless room-to-room clearance that secured a high-level Al-Qaeda hard drive. When the smoke cleared, the American commander of Task Force K-Bar made a historic declaration. This mysterious Canadian unit was now his absolute first choice for any direct action mission on Earth. Today, we are stripping down the exact close-quarters battle kit that makes Canada's Joint Task Force 2 the most lethal door kickers in NATO. To understand the gear, you have to understand the environment it was forged in. When JTF-2 arrived in Kandahar in late 2001, the US military barely knew who they were. They were rolled into Task Force K-Bar, a multinational special operations unit commanded by Navy SEAL Captain Robert Harward. Their mandate was direct action and sensitive site exploitation. In plain English, hunting high-value targets, breaching cave complexes, and clearing hostile compounds room by room. Close Quarters Battle, or CQB, is the most violent, compressed, and unforgiving form of warfare. Inside a room, you don't have time to call in artillery or establish a flanking maneuver. Survival comes down to split-second target identification, overwhelming speed, and gear that absolutely will not fail when slammed against door frames or choked with dust. During that December raid, the 6 Canadians supporting the Green Berets didn't just survive a helicopter crash, they executed a textbook explosive breach through high, thick mud walls. The Americans peeled off to destroy a weapons cache, while the JTF-2 assaulters drove hard into the main building. In an environment where visibility was zero and the air was thick with pulverized dirt, their weapon systems ran flawlessly. They secured the target and pulled out a hard drive that was handed directly to US intelligence. So, what exactly are they carrying into these rooms?
If you look at the primary weapon of a JTF-2 assaulter, your first thought might be that it's just another M4. You would be dead wrong. The backbone of the JTF-2 arsenal is the Colt Canada C8, specifically the SFW, or Special Forces weapon, and the upgraded IUR, or Integrated Upper Receiver. This rifle is so highly regarded that the British SAS, arguably the pioneers of modern CQB, adopted it as the L119, entirely based on the Canadian design. Why? It comes down to metallurgy and engineering. A standard M4 barrel is button-rifled. The C8 uses a cold hammer-forged heavy barrel. In CQB, assaulters fire in rapid strings to suppress and eliminate threats at extremely close range. A standard barrel heats up, warps, and loses accuracy. The C8's heavy hammer-forged barrel acts as a massive heat sink, maintaining pinpoint accuracy even after dumping multiple magazines. Furthermore, JTF-2 utilizes the IUR, or Integrated Upper Receiver. On a standard rifle, the handguard is bolted to the receiver. If you drop the rifle or smash it against a doorframe while rushing a room, that handguard can shift. If your infrared laser is mounted to that handguard, your Zero is instantly destroyed. You will miss your target in the dark. The Colt Canada IUR is machined from a single continuous block of aerospace-grade aluminum. The receiver and handguard are one solid piece of metal. It is virtually impossible to shift the Zero of the lasers and optics mounted on top, no matter how much abuse the weapon takes during a breach. For strict CQB environments, JTF-2 runs a 10-inch barrel variant. When you are pieing a corner, navigating a narrow hallway, or entering a doorway, a long barrel is a fatal liability. It gives your position away and can be grabbed by a hostile combatant. The 10-inch barrel keeps the weapon tucked tight to the operator's body, maximizing mobility. They run these suppressed, not to be silent. A suppressed 5.56 round is still incredibly loud, but to mask the flash, reduce the concussive blast inside a concrete room, and allow the assaulter team to actually hear their comms over the gunfire. A rifle is useless if you can't acquire the target.
In the split second an operator steps through a fatal funnel, the doorway of a hostile room, they have roughly half a second to process the occupants, distinguish between hostiles and non-combatants, and place accurate fire. Iron sights are entirely obsolete in this environment. JTF-2 relies heavily on holographic weapon sights, primarily the EOTech EPS-3 series. A holographic sight differs from a standard red dot because it projects a reticle that appears to float out in front of the weapon. This allows the assaulter to keep both eyes wide open, maintaining full peripheral vision. When you are clearing a room, tunnel vision gets you killed. You need to see the guy hiding in the corner of your eye while your muzzle tracks the primary threat. But CQB rarely happens in broad daylight. The raids in Afghanistan, and later in Iraq targeting ISIS compounds, happened in the dead of night. To own the night, JTF-2 runs dual or panoramic night vision goggles, usually white phosphor tubes that provide insane clarity. But you can't physically press your cheek against the rifle stock and look through an EOTech while wearing bulky NVGs. Instead, they use the LA5 PEQ, a high-power infrared aiming laser mounted to the top of the monolithic rail. To the naked eye, the room is pitch black. To the JTF-2 operator under goggles, they press a pressure switch on their grip and a solid beam of infrared light shoots from their weapon straight onto the target's chest. They don't aim down the sights, they shoot the laser. The LA5 also features an infrared illuminator, essentially an invisible flashlight that floods a dark room with infrared light, allowing the assaulters to clearly identify faces and weapons hidden in the shadows before they pulled the trigger.
You can't clear a room if you can't get inside. The first phase of any CQB assault is the breach. During the December 2001 raid, JTF-2 was faced with high, thick Afghan mud walls. Kicking it was impossible. Prying it was suicide. They had to use explosive breaching. JTF-2 operators carry highly specialized breaching kits. Depending on the target, they have three primary ways to get in: mechanical, ballistic, or explosive. For a standard door, an assaulter might carry a short-barreled Remington 870 shotgun loaded with specialized breaching rounds. These aren't standard buckshot. They are frangible rounds, often made of powdered zinc or compressed steel dust. The operator jams the standoff device at the end of the shotgun barrel directly into the door's hinges or lock. When they fire, the round destroys the metal hinge and then instantly turns to dust upon impact. This prevents the bullet from passing through the door and accidentally hitting a hostage or a teammate on the other side. For reinforced targets like the mud compound in Kandahar, they use explosive flex linear charges or water impulse charges. The breacher unrolls a length of det cord backed with a precise amount of C4, shapes it to the target, and blows it. The resulting explosion relies on a concept called violence of action. The sheer concussive force of the breach instantly disorients anyone inside. The overpressure blows out their eardrums, the flash blinds them, and the dust fills the air. Before the enemy can even process that their wall has just vanished, JTF-2 is already inside the room, lasers on targets, effectively ending the fight before the opposition can chamber a round. In CQB, if your primary weapon jams, you do not fix it. Fixing a malfunction takes 3 seconds. 3 seconds in a room full of hostiles means you die. Instead, you drop the rifle on its sling and transition to your secondary. For decades, JTF-2's legendary sidearm was the Sig Sauer P226, trusted for its heavy metal frame and sheer reliability. Recently, CANSOFCOM transitioned to the P320 platform, a striker-fired modular handgun. The P320 allows the operator to drop the internal fire control unit into different grip modules, customizing the weapon to the size of their hands and the specific mission requirements. In a CQB environment, these pistols are heavily modified with flared magwells for faster reloading, extended base pads, and miniature red dot sights for immediate target acquisition. Holding all of this together is the operator's kit. JTF-2 runs lightweight, minimalist plate carriers, often heavily favored by Cry precision. They run slick fronts whenever possible. If an assaulter needs to hit the dirt to avoid incoming fire, thick pouches on their chest will prop them up, exposing them to enemy rounds. They distribute their magazines, flashbangs, and medical gear to their cummerbunds and tactical belts.
Their heads are protected by high-cut ballistic helmets, which expose the ears. This isn't a design flaw, it's a requirement to mount heavy-duty active hearing protection, like Peltor Comtacs. These headsets digitally compress the deafening sound of gunfire while simultaneously amplifying low-decibel sounds, allowing a JTF-2 operator to hear a hostile combatant whispering or chambering around in the next room over. The December 2001 compound raid proved to the world what Canadian High Command already knew. JTF-2 doesn't need to loudly announce their presence. Their close-quarters assault kit, the Cold Hammer-forged C8s, the holographic optics, the frangible breaching rounds, and the integrated night vision is arguably the best on the planet. But GEAR is just metal and glass. The true lethality of Joint Task Force 2 isn't the rifle, it's the operator pulling the trigger. Subscribe to Military Warfare for more breakdowns on the world's most elite units and hit the bell so you don't miss the next debrief. Stay sharp.